Ethernet exchanges are a carrier-neutral meeting place between buyers and sellers of Ethernet services. Ethernet exchanges were born out of the Metro Ethernet Forum as a way to meet their mission, which is to accelerate the worldwide adoption of carrier Ethernet. Ethernet exchanges provide a meeting point where a seller and a buyer of Ethernet networks can connect their networks together at a point called the Ethernet External Network-to-Network Interface, or ENNI. This allows the seller of Ethernet services, typically an access provider who can reach many different buildings in their footprint, to be able to sell their services to a retail Ethernet service provider buyer that enables them to reach those buildings that are off-net. The Ethernet interconnects that are performed at the ENNI do much more than just connecting the two networks together as you would do with a TDM cross-connect, because Ethernet services are much more complex than TDM services. You have things that you have to worry about, such as VLAN mapping and translation between the buyer and the seller of the network. You have to have things like mapping different classes of service if there's a mismatch. And then you also have to map the amount of bandwidth required in the form of a committed information rate or an excess information rate. These things are defined in MEF 26, which is a specification defined in the ENNI External Network-to-Network Interface connection. Another capability of an Ethernet exchange is to have a directory of Ethernet service locations. These locations are basically where anyone connected to the Ethernet exchange can reach. So for example, if 10 buildings are accessible by an access provider, then you have 10 possible Ethernet service locations by that service provider. If those buildings are multi-tenant units, then you can multiply that number, increasing the number of Ethernet service locations that you can possibly reach. Having connections to those Ethernet service locations doesn't really mean that service is actually delivered to those services. What it means is that service can be delivered to those locations, or it actually may be today. So by having a directory of buildings that you can search, you can now say, I have a customer location in a building in a particular city on a particular street, and if I need to connect to that building, I would search the directory in the Ethernet Exchange directory and be able to find if that building is available, and if so, make that connection and bring services to market much more quickly.
Fujitsu, more than 75 years of trusted partnership with the worldwide communication industry. We continue to lead the way by redefining innovation, setting the standard for best-in-class optical communication hardware and turnkey professional service solutions.